Hi, my name's Sue Green, and as President, I'd like to welcome members to the Creedishar Support Group's Australia's National Online Conference for 2021. For this online event to happen, I would like to express appreciation to the National Disability Conference Initiative and all the hard work of our members involved in fundraising for this and other events across Australia. I'm very happy that our South Australian members are able to meet in person for the webinar today. This webinar and others given during our online conference will also be available on our Creedishar Support Group's YouTube channel to ensure they're accessible to all. Now, due to the restrictions with COVID-19, this year's National Conference and Family Weekend, which was to be held at the Adelaide Hills Convention Centre, South Australia, has been postponed to the 11th to 13th of March 2022. We're going to provide further details on this as the year progresses, but please book the date in your diaries, as it'll be great for families from across Australia to be able to meet again. We really look forward to seeing people face to face, particularly those in Victoria. Before introducing our speaker today, I want to take a moment to discuss our next AGM to be held in Melbourne and online via Zoom across Australia on Sunday, the 21st of March at 2 p.m. Australian Eastern Time. Now, the Creedishar Support Group of Australia was formed in 1996, so we will be celebrating having our 25th AGM. And since that time, we've been an incorporated association, which means we've been Victorian based. And as our membership is growing and we're more geographically spread out than any ever before, we really need to think about our sustainability in the future. So at our AGM on the 21st of March, we're going to be asking all members to vote on a special resolution that will change our legal registration from an incorporated association to a company limited by guarantee under the National Corporations Act 2001. And this special resolution will also involve changing our name to the Creedishar Support Group Limited and adopting a new constitution. Information about the AGM and the special resolution will be emailed to members very shortly, and I look forward to your participation in the AGM if you can attend. Now to the business of the day. It's with pleasure that I introduce Jayne Barrett from Community Living Project and her presentation entitled Inclusion, Building a Good Life. I'm sure that all members of the Creedishar Support Group of Australia will benefit greatly from Jayne's presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for the invitation to come and speak to you today. I would like to first introduce myself a little bit so that you know who I am and where I fit into things. And I thought, no better way to do that than to introduce you to my three daughters. The one with the blue hair is my youngest, that's Sarah. Melissa's crouched down, she's the middle child, and Amanda's my firstborn in the wheelchair. This photo was the last photo of the three girls taken together, and it was Mother's Day 1999. So Amanda passed away the following year. She was 27 when she died, so it puts a context to me and my life and my family. And an identity, I suppose, as a parent who never was given what I wanted for my daughter, Amanda. And in stark reality or stark contrast, the things that were offered to Amanda certainly were very different to those that were offered to my other two daughters. It taught me quite a lot. So for Amanda, who, as you could see, perhaps has severe and multiple disabilities, Amanda had no effective communication other than some sounds, so people who knew her well could understand somewhat. She couldn't lift a finger to scratch her nose. She had extreme issues with epilepsy, and major issues with being able to eat well. So she's somebody who, you know, in times gone by probably would have been seen as a vegetable. And, you know, I had heard that said of her in her lifetime as well. Amanda lived for 27 years. She wasn't expected to live the first day, the first week, etc. So I suppose I came up fighting as a parent because I wanted a good life for my daughter Amanda, and as the others came along for them, could see what they were getting that she wasn't getting. So just in terms of continuing to introduce myself, I work for the Community Living Project, and I'm now probably in about my 37th or 38th year of employment with the Community Living Project. I never thought I'd do that. It wasn't really part of the plan, but I've had so many different roles in the organisation and opportunities that it's been a great place for me. I was part of the original parent group that set up the Community Living Project and established the values of the organisation. So, and I've put the mission statement there on the board, which is about people being supported to have a unique and purposeful life of inclusion through having home, relationships, competencies, highly valued roles, participation in their community. So those things are really, really important. They're at the heart of me, and I suppose the things I sought for Amanda in her life and believe in around a whole lot of other people. And of course, in my experience, I've had lots of association with other families who have also found a home in these values, a home and a common sense of where we're wanting to go in helping our sons and daughters have the best life possible. When Amanda was born, you know, I had awful things said like, just put her in care and go on and live your life. And that happened all the time. In Adelaide, we had an institution, a medical model institution called the Home for Incurables. That's where people like her belonged. So, you know, coming from a place of that sort of harshness, it really riled me. And she deserved better, much better than that. So for Amanda, those experiences were ones that hit at my heart when tonsillitis happened to my three daughters, Melissa and Sarah, one after the other, and they went to the doctor and we were given a prescription for antibiotics. In a day or so it was done. When Amanda's turn came to have the tonsillitis and I took her to the doctor said, you know, if we don't prescribe, she'll probably pass away and that might be your choice here. And so, you know, like, wow. So amazing things. Now, I had thought, no, I keep thinking, that's a long time ago, you know, back in the early 70s, this was happening. But sad but true, I talk to families with youngsters today and very similar things are happening. And so it's not gone away. And so I think the more I suppose I get opportunities to talk about these sorts of things to people, to say, how can we change that? How can we make things different? So the Community Living Project fits with a really great place for me because the values are those values that are at my heart and the values of the families and the staff and management of the organisation. And so I currently am the manager of the Circles Initiative and the Micro Enterprise Project, two initiatives that have been set up for assisting people to, first with the Circles Initiative, to build circles of support of freely given relationships. A circle of support is something that looks out for someone over their life. And micro enterprise is an alternative for people with disabilities who are interested in setting up their own small enterprise as an alternative to attending day programs or sheltered workshops, supported employment type opportunities. So micro-enterprise sits there. I won't go on a lot about those two things that I do, but I've got several people's stories to talk to you about that will show some of these things that have happened in people's lives, hopefully to help them change for the better, to have a more inclusive life. So inclusion's my catchphrase, and so if I Google inclusion, I come up with something like inclusion is most importantly seen as putting inclusive values into action. It's a commitment to particular values which accounts for a wish to overcome exclusion and promote participation. Values are fundamental guides and prompts to action, for all actions affecting others are underpinned by values. So I found that really powerful when I found that definition, and thinking about, well, I wonder what the values were underpinning the people who said, or the doctor who said, no, this is an option with tonsillitis not to have the antibiotic. Those values are that perhaps someone like Amanda's life isn't as important, or she's a drain on society, or she's a burden for me, or she costs too much, or, you get to be able to analyse the values that underpin some of the actions you experience. So for me, that descriptor actually helps me think about my values and explain them. So I think having a vision for what your son or daughter's life can be like, the same as any other son or daughter or person of that age, is a really important piece to actually know where you're heading. And really, when I think of the vision I wanted for Amanda's life, it was just an ordinary life, just like anybody else, the same opportunities, same things in life. I wasn't looking for extra, I was just looking for the same. And so this notion of ordinary life, it's not really extraordinary, we're not making superheroes out of people who live with disabilities. It's just the ordinary opportunities. So having a vision of that, I think, is really one of the things that I've learnt is really important, to try and develop that, so that you know when you're compromising on what's happening for your son or daughter. And so a framework that I think it's a framework that I think helps to understand how we might change things, how we might actually help think about things that are what's typical that happens in a person's life when they're, 2 or 4 or 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50. What's generally typical that's happening in people's lives, and look at changing the disability construct of what the vision is for people who live with disability. So I think understanding how we can actually think about that is really helpful. Crafting a good life and how it might be possible, I think I've found, and know a lot of other families have found, being really vigilant about the decisions you make, and being very aware of when you're compromising, or how bigger goals you have, what the visions are for the future and where that might take you. This, I think, is a diagram that I think you might have even seen it before, Sasha, that I think for me describes the difference that I see happens when a person with a disability has the life of segregation and the disability construct of life. So the ordinary life is the top one. So, people are born, they go to preschool, kindy, primary school, high school, TAFE, uni, get a job, relationships, home, family. That's traditionally and generally what happens. That's the ordinary life, the inclusive life. Then we've got this disability constructed life, which is this trajectory here, and it takes you way away from what the mainstream ordinary life opportunities are. So you get things that are very different, and they usually have special written in front of them, and that's always a clue. But you get early intervention, you get the segregated primary school, high schools, the TAFE classes that are segregated. I know people in their 50s with intellectual disability that are still going to a TAFE numeracy and literacy class that they've been going to forever. You know, when are they going to get numeracy and literacy? You have post-school options, so usually and historically it's been day programs that are post-school options, or places that people go as an alternative to work. You know, there's sheltered workshops too, where people pay quite dearly, and NDIS has, I think, helped us see how much it costs to send someone to a sheltered workshop to work, and they get a few dollars an hour pay. So you know, understanding that suddenly becomes a bit of a reality about what a sheltered workshop really is, or sheltered work, I should say. And of course then for people to move on and live in group homes. So, you know, if you were someone like my Amanda, a group home wasn't even going to cut the mustard for you. You needed to be in a medical model, big something, where they could afford to employ a whole lot of nurses. And so I think this slide for me also gives a bit of a visual about what does happen in life. So strategies to think about trying to work on that ordinary life. And that vision of where things could go. So the importance of having valued roles. Having a valued role is really important for all of us. You know, if we think about our own valued roles, what that gives us. And so, you know, I got to the point, Amanda, one of the first valued roles that Amanda had was that she started being supported by a worker to go along to her local church youth group and youth service the evening on Sundays. Mm-hmm. And so she became a youth group member. You know, it was a highly valued role, and when you said to anybody in the disability sector that Amanda attends a youth group, or she, you know, what? Like, it was a very, very unusual thing. So valued roles are an amazing thing to think about for Amanda being a youth group member. So then I think, well, what do people get from their valued roles? So what Amanda got from being a youth group member was every Friday night we knew where she needed to be at what time and what time she'd be home. And I knew that because she was there, I could go out for dinner. You know, I had the respite, I suppose. But, you know, what do people get? She also got the sense of welcome, belonging, because she was one of them. She got involvement to try a whole lot of things she wouldn't otherwise have tried, like they went for night walks with torches and all manner of things that youth group people might do, be silly, listen to music, play games, go on, go to the movies, go to the beach, all sorts of things that were the youth group program that Amanda, of course, just joined. And she could hang out on Sunday night with the bunch of kids at church and be part of that group. So, in fact, she got a whole lot of belonging, etc. from, or not etc., loads of etceteras from actually just being in the youth group. And, you know, it does bring just one valued role in that example, brings a whole lot of diversity and individuality to those roles. And in fact, through youth group, Amanda made a lifelong friend, a young woman called Lisa, who decided she really liked being with Amanda and would call in and visit Amanda other times at home. And Lisa was one of these young teenagers that was a bit hippie with a guitar. She played a guitar and loved to sing, and she very soon didn't need a support worker around when she was there. Got a confidence with Amanda and would pick her up and take her down the beach and sit on the jetty and sing songs and play music, and just all sorts of lovely things came from that one valued role, if you like, but its diversity and the individuality, all of the pieces that it brought was just quite amazing. Wouldn't have been there otherwise. So I think it's really important to understand valued roles as a strategy and a pathway for people to be included. As I say, if Amanda hadn't attended and become a member of the youth group, then all of those things that I've mentioned, and hopefully you can imagine the other pieces I'm not talking about that happened, just wouldn't have been in Amanda's life, in our lives, and in Lisa's life too, So valued roles is a really important thing, or strategy to think about. So, if we do spend a moment just thinking about what valued roles do we each have, and we can actually think about the status it gives us, or the importance, or the purpose, or who you hang out with, all those things that I said about Amanda, for us the same thing, and it's the same thing for everyone. So in fact, some of the valued roles that you might think about that you have, or anyone can have, might be things like, being a homeowner, being a brother and sister, being a sports fan, being an employee, uncle, aunt, cousin, a Christian, a church member, I don't know where that one went, gym goer, fitness, gardener. I just put a whole lot of roles of different people I know and me that might sit up here, and some of the people I'm going to talk to you about in a moment. And so, having valued roles gives people a real identity, and people can talk about who they are in relation to that valued role. As I mentioned before, I've come across a whole lot of family members, parents mostly, over the years I've been around, who've actually had very similar aspirations for their sons or daughters, or looked on and thought, how can I get some of that for my son or daughter? And so I have become involved with probably a national network of families and people, and some international networks too. I've had the opportunity to travel to Ireland and North America and New Zealand in the circles of families who have inclusion as their values and wishes and wants for their sons and daughters. So I've chosen a few stories here of people, families, of people who said no to the segregated trajectory. People that said, well, no, when he leaves school, he's not going to go to the day program. Or people have said, special school, I don't think so. I want my son in mainstream school. I want the right supports around him, but I want him in mainstream school. So, so I've got some stories and some photos to show you. All of these stories start with having this low expectation. So you couldn't get much lower than the expectation everyone gave me about Amanda. But, as I said, you find it everywhere still. And how that makes you feel, for me, it brought me out fighting. I came out as a fierce advocate. Some people just go under and see their kids as burdens and, need to go with what's on offer or feel they need to. What happens at those points too is that the point of where you get to say no, you actually see that the systems and what's being on offer actually is starting to separate the person's needs from their human needs of belonging and love and friendship and the things that are all human to us, acceptance and all those things, to their specific needs for, attention for epilepsy, medical, behavioural, you name it, all those other needs. So people fall into negative roles then because they become burdens. They're not seen as able in any way. Their gifts and talents certainly are never particularly seen. And so the power of negative roles is a continuous cycle of low expectations and grouping people together. Because for Amanda, she needed to be with other people who had epilepsy, who had trouble with eating, because then they could employ the staff that worked with those people, and those people were the experts in dealing with those things. Even though some of our experience was that she didn't eat for days because they couldn't get her to eat, couldn't manage to feed her properly, and all sorts of course, I think most people know that the experts aren't always the ones that can manage to, build a better opportunity for people. So the role of family, I think too often we as family members we become subservient in the face of the professionals who know better and accepting of their opinions, and so lose a whole lot of natural authority and give over to the professionals, the systems, etc. So I'm a really strong believer and reminder of people that as parents we have natural authority around our sons and daughters, and the role of family is working clearly in collaboration with helping people have good, ordinary lives. Hopelessness of the future is the other piece that, if, as I explained with Amanda's life, there was a hopelessness. Just leave her and go away and everything, you can go on with your life because this is hopeless. So there is a hopelessness of the future, or this is always going to be my burden to carry. So, what are the barriers and what prevents an ordinary life? Well, I think those things that I've just talked about, of breaking down families, parents' resolve to understand all sorts of different information, just having one source of information given you without all of the options that are possible. And so there are many barriers, for people who have fragile health. Amanda really wasn't a health condition waiting to happen, but she needed nurses to deal with her, and there's people who I know who have some major behavioural issues, and the people who know them best and are often the ones who can manage their behaviours, and then they're thrown into other environments and their behaviours are not managed well. So, how do we know how to set things up for success is really important. So I think ordinary life concepts are really important. So what are aged peers doing, what's ordinarily happening in people's lives, and having that positive vision of where I want to go, where I would like my son and daughter's life to end up. If you imagine any of those angled pieces, well, that's a values base, and that might be where your vision sits. Or if you're sitting in the top values base, it might be having a vision of actually achieving some of those things across the top. I met a man years ago, and he was 20-ish with an intellectual disability, and all he talked about was getting married, falling in love and getting married. And it was like on all the time. And I think for probably 15 years people made condescending sort of, oh well, yes, maybe, and pushed it away as not a possibility. He ended up meeting someone, falling in love and getting married when he was in his 40s. And it happened because his father actually started saying, maybe we should listen, and he had met a girl, and so it all happened. And you think if you stop that vision of, well, maybe this is possible, why not, in the scheme of things. So I'd like to introduce you to a few people. David. Now I've got permission from these people to share their stories, both their parents and they are really thrilled to share their stories because it might well be inspirational for somebody else. So, and some of these pictures are quite old because this is a story about times gone by to now. And so this is David and Brenda. The house, the mud brick house that they're standing in front of, is David's home. David has an acquired brain injury. When he was in his 20s, he was climbing some hills with some mates and a rock fell from a mate above, clocked him on the head. As easy as that. So for David, he was in critical care for a long time, ended up being in the then Julia Fast services for rehabilitation, and his mum was told that he was never ever going to be suitable to go into community and that she should prepare that he would be either kept there or discharged into a facility. So he had major issues with memory, still has, with short-term memory, has some major issues with vision, and probably gets really annoyed with himself if things don't go well for him. He always wants to, as we all do well, and if things don't go wrong, he gets really angry with himself. So, Brenda thought, blow that, he's coming home. So she took him home from quite intensive care with, I think she had 4 hours of support a week for Dave back then. These days, and so building a home for David was one of the things that she thought, her vision. She had this vision. This family are a family of eco-friendly type people. The sort of people, if you go to the toilet in their house, there's matches on the toilet, not spray deodorant. Really, Dave uses the grey water for gardening. So, I would aspire to be like this, but I should aspire to. So in fact, the mud brick house was a great idea. They had this block of land, not down here at Noarlunga Heights, and it took Dave and friends, family, all sorts of people, 9 years to build this house. They made every brick out of the soil off the land. David learnt by rote how to get around the house because his short-term memory is such that he can't work out where the bathroom is, unless it's done many, many, many times. He needs space and place that's his, that is organised right for him. So this house was... mud brick houses, people attract other people who are interested in mud brick houses. So they had a whole lot of help to build this house from people who were just interested to get involved. David had ended up with 1 day a week support where we assisted them to find a worker. He wasn't a support worker, he's somebody who'd built his own mud brick house. And so he would work with Dave 1 day a week, showing and directing, bits and pieces of how this should happen. So, if you like, the vision for Dave. Dave is a gardener. He's a hard worker. He wakes up at the crack of dawn and works really hard, physically hard. He goes to bed really early because he's exhausted. And these are just a run of pictures of Dave working around his house. And so, you know, the valued role of being a gardener. David's a homeowner, you know, he's also a handyman around the house. He can talk your ear off about this piece of wood. He knows wood, really knows a lot about wood and remembers, and it's this great big beam that he can tell you about. He's using heaps of skills. Now he has support, so there's somebody not far away from him assisting him. He loves going to the gym, he wants to be fit and healthy, and has been going to the gym all these years. So if you think about some of those valued roles, he's a cook, he loves cooking too, and so making his own food, and Dave's got is he celiac, something like that, and so he's got to watch what he eats, and he grows a whole lot of stuff organically. He's a chess player, you know, and so an artist. So he's a painter. He's a very talented man. And so for David, having all those roles in life, valued roles, are the roles that his mum's really worked on to actually help him have a place in an ordinary life. So Dave goes to art classes. He went back to have music lessons again. He actually loves jazz. He plays classical music, but he loves jazz music. His gardening is, you know, if he gets up in the morning and no one knows where he is, he's usually in the garden. He hates leaves falling in the wrong places, and he's got an ambition of creating the best compost, you know. So, and there's all these tasks and jobs that he loves to do. So really, an ordinary life. Perhaps building a mud brick house isn't that ordinary, but you know, it's not super person. And maybe having all these talents. You know, I certainly can't play the piano, paint, play chess. You know, a whole lot of the things that he can do. But they are ordinary things, and so Dave's life is an ordinary life. He is supported to have his ordinary life. So this next person is Felicity. Again, I'd like you to be thinking about the roles, the valued roles that keep cropping up for these people, because they are, for me, the pathway and strategy to think about how to start getting into the ordinary life and opportunities, or building more of. So Felicity is probably in her early 20s about this stage. Felicity is somebody who has quite significant autism. She doesn't speak, she does some has some sign, and also has some challenges around behaviours, etc., with her autism. So Felicity, when her mum and dad were looking for the next place, she was living at home with mum and dad, and in her early 20s they thought, right, it's time for Fels to find her own place. So Felicity moved into a house within the same suburb, bit of a quick little walk a few streets away from her mum and dad's, and she rents a house from a housing cooperative, a 3-bedroom house, and she's still living there today, and this photo probably harks back to the early 90s, I would say. So she's lived in she turned 50 recently, so her mum had a big celebration and invited us, quite a lot of us, to her birthday. So Felicity, she started, so she moved into her own home with support, had a bundle of support. She was going to a day program, and some of her behaviours were such that when she was with other vulnerable people, it was seen that she put them at risk. So she was suspended from attending the day program. So then thinking about for Felicity, well, if she can't go to the day program, what then? So sometimes not even the congregate and segregate services are right for people, are they? So in fact, her mum, who's an avid gardener, decided that her new place was going to have a garden full of flowers. One of the things that Felicity likes doing is water play. There's not a lot that she actively will engage with doing. But the garden helped her with watering and picking and tending the garden and growing herbs and flowers that she picks and prepares and sells in her little business to local cafes around the Port Noarlunga area, which is the area she lives in. Her mum, when they chose the house for Felicity to move into, so as long as in the middle of the night in my dressing gown I can run round there in 5 minutes, that's how close I want it to be. Just to make sure, if I'm needed, I can get there in a rush. Anyway, so Felicity, and she's still operating a small business, providing herbs and edible flowers to cafes in the southern area. Felicity also became an audit student at Flinders University and spent many years being included in classes that were suitable. So the audit student arrangement was that if you approached one of the teachers and they were happy to have you in their classroom, you paid I think it was $50 a year fee, and you could sit on the classes and you could use a photocopier or something. I don't know, there was a couple of things that your $50 bought. So Felicity did a whole lot of subjects. Now, I can't remember what that subject was, but one of the stories that was, one might think that Felicity doesn't understand things. So a story that came as her support person after sitting in on a lecture about solar power and what have you, and the support worker was driving her home, she kept on knocking on the window and pointing, and the worker worked out after a little while she was identifying solar panels on the top of telephone boxes and wanting to engage about, I've seen these, I know what they... So, the sense that Felicity couldn't grow and develop, learn and understand is just amazing. Another really fascinating piece for Fels too was that she was really ill at one time and was in Flinders Medical Centre in intensive care, ICU. And one of the nurses that came in to look after her said, "Oh, I know you. You're in my class at Flinders." So the nursing school and the disability subjects were combined, and still might be, I'm not sure, but and so one of the students whose class she sat in with knew her from back then. So and she had a reality about who Felicity was that certainly the other staff in the ICU did not, which was very powerful for getting good care. So I'm going to speed through Isaac a bit. So Isaac's a young man who's just 21 or 2, but Isaac lives, he has Fragile X syndrome, which means he has some autism that's really a big challenge in his life and a mild intellectual disability. Isaac's been in mainstream school right from the beginning. Some of the things that, if you think about roles here, some of the things that are about who Isaac is, he loves jet skiing, fast cars. He gets the opportunity to drive them, to do a whole lot of stuff. Ordinary pictures, really. He doesn't have to be a young man who has a disability, does he? More of the same, just a lad out doing what lads do. An animal lover and He was working at the zoo for a while. So when Isaac started, he was mainstream school right from the beginning. But as his mum says, when he moved to high school or the more senior years, it was a bit challenging. So Sue organised for Isaac to have a circle of support, and the facilitator helped Sue, his mum, and Isaac identify some students from the school who might be in that circle of support. This is a picture of those young people, and they actually had helped him in the social sense through his schooling to belong, to know him well. These young people also were people who spend time away from school with Isaac, and through his circle of support had got to really know who he is. This slide should have had a little video with it, but I can't get that to work, and I'm sorry, because this is just a little clip of Isaac at the end of his year 8, where he was given an award, and the clip should show him going up and getting his award, which is rather endearing, but I'm sorry I don't have that live there. So he got through year 8, even though it was a challenge with the help. So his circle of friends doing stuff with him outside of school as well. Highly intentionally organised things that are a bit of fun for the young people to get involved in doing. Sleepovers, all sorts of fun things that young people might do together. So these are his graduation photos. I believe that was year 11, and this is year 12 graduation photos. And these are the circle of support people, all grown up. Well, nearly grown up, because they've grown up a bit more now, and they're still around in his life. Isaac has left school. He has a micro enterprise. What was Isaac going to do after school? So his family have their own business that's doing quite nicely, and so with some help from the micro enterprise project and some discovery about what might work well for Isaac, the family business bought another car to add to, I think they have others. And this is a refrigerated van for Isaac, and so Isaac's business is Cool Carts, and so he does pickups from supermarkets and delivers food for people, and has a whole lot of customers that people who cook meals, pre-prepared meals that need to be picked up and taken to their outlets, etc. So Isaac has a personal assistant who supports him in his work, because of course Isaac doesn't drive, and so the young man the other side of the van there is his personal assistant, not a support worker, and so Isaac now has his Cool Carts micro enterprise. His mum had to stop a whole lot of business through COVID. He was run off his feet, and she had to make the call about him overworking and the demand on the service, on the business. So interesting. So, there's a few stories there of some very different people. So the ordinary life, where's it likely to be found? For me, it's in a good way to think into that is through valued roles. What might be the valued roles? Where I started with Amanda with youth group. One valued role, once we got that sorted, what the next one, and knowing that sense of what are the values I want, where do I want Amanda to live her life, and then what does it take? So for me, having the vision for what a great life might look like, thinking about aged peers, people who don't have disabilities, what are people doing who are about the same age? Thinking about that and looking at those people as inspiration. Again, I keep on harping on about the valued roles, but I think that they are really a key part of getting to the vision in life. If Isaac's mum and dad didn't have a different aspiration for him after school, I'm not sure where Isaac might be, because I think he'd be pretty challenged in a day program. Certainly probably wouldn't have capacity to work in a sheltered work environment. So interesting. So the valued roles that they actually held for him was, going to school and getting a job, and not far off their mind is, where's Isaac going to live down the track, which I heard a couple of you talking about a bit earlier too. Yeah. So what's the vision? Thinking developmentally, growing one step at a time is, you don't have to do it all at once, but taking one step at a time and being really conscious about what those steps are. And for Isaac, who might be seen to be somebody who couldn't learn, certainly understanding how he can learn and develop, especially in the roles he's filling as in his business, of being able to be ready on time, being able to attend to a task for longer, being able to engage in community and with community about his product and his business, etc. Huge things to learn. I think too that my little story about Amanda and her friendship with Lisa, that was just like the icing on the cake, the star in the crown. Like, I had never thought someone might step out and see my Amanda as being worthy of being a friend. Woo. And so, relationships are really important in everyone's life, and we can't not acknowledge that that's really important. I have been very fortunate to find good allies and hang out with them. So I tend to not hang out with people who think that group homes are a great thing. I tend to not hang out with people who, unless they're trying to think of other opportunities, think about all the opportunities, I tend to not hang out with people who feel like their sons and daughters are burdens or don't have gifts and talents and contributions to make. I tend to find people of like mind, people with similar values, and in that gives me strength, and I think helps people think about what opportunities there might be for their sons and daughters and test their thinking. So this is my final piece. So it's a saying, a little ditty, if we believe you're like it and treat you like it, you'll become like it. What you think of me, I think of me, and what I think of me, I'll be. And I think of Isaac particularly, and so Isaac's a young business owner who's working really hard his trade and got the world at his feet, really, a young man who knows where his life is going to take him. And just to leave you with, I'm here in South Australia, and I mentioned that I have connections with allies around Australia who have the same values. And I thought, given that this is likely to be shared around people around Australia, that having a few organisations named that might be go-to places, be somewhat helpful. Now, I have just talked on and on. Is there any comments or questions or?
I think a comment that comes to mind when you're talking about Isaac, I've noticed this holidays with William, his younger sisters who are twins, they were getting summer holiday jobs, and we went off and we were talking about going to work and getting ready, and William, he tapped me on the shoulder in the back of the car and he'd said to me, work, Bunnings. Like, we forgot about you. Yeah. We're all talking about everybody else. and their valued roles, and that it's a given that, you know, as you go to high school, you might get a part-time job, and you want one too. And he's listening to all the conversations. He's aware. And to think that, you know, he was sitting in the back of the car and we didn't really give him the opportunity. Mm-hmm. So, hence,
a reminder,
you know, this is so important, isn't it? To keep checking in and seeing where we're at, and keep doors open and keep looking for things. So, yeah,
I think sometimes we get caught up in the day-to-day grind of just doing and being and pulling off each day. That the vision and the thinking beyond and outside of that maintenance of the day.
And a beautiful example again today. The one day he decides he's going to be sick and stay home. He slept in this morning. He's like, oh no. And eventually he got up, and I was thinking, oh, he's going to be all ill. And he said, realised he was too late for school. And he went, work with Dad. I said, you want to go to work with Dad? Yes. Yeah. Go get dressed, brush your teeth, go. For me, was dressed and at the door, no problem. He could, you know, if it was for a school day, it would have taken a lot longer to have got dressed and had the teeth brushed and had breakfast. Yeah. But the thought of getting up to go for work with his dad.
I think what you're saying is really interesting, because we've been listening so beautifully to what you've been saying today, but I think listening to what our person wants is really important. Like, it's so easy for us to make decisions about what we think our son or daughter's life should look like, and, you know, there is great value in that, but listening to what they actually want for their life could be quite different to what we think they want for their life. So just tuning into those moments that suddenly change everything. I think me, work, Bunnings, it's like, oh my gosh, there's a 3-year vision for me right there, you know?
Absolutely. And you could spend forever trying to plot and think of what are we going to do. So ask them. They tell me straight away. So that, right, that's, you know, it might not be Bunnings, but it might be along those lines, and it might, you know, it might have many different aspects of, you know, all the other things that he enjoys, but we've got our foundation of where we can start, and you know, we know the pathway because he said.
I've been thinking about Will's transition to after school, like, for a couple of years, and I had all these ideas in my head, and I'm putting them all in place when it just occurred to me, actually I should check with Will if he's happy to do all of these things, and thank goodness he was, but it was a complete afterthought. Like, I've had this vision in my head with what I saw him doing when he left school, but it was, oops, I better check with Will about this. And lucky we had the same
vision.
Do you have courses for setting up circles of support?
Not courses as such, but circles of support are a facilitator for a circle of support is something you can purchase with an NDIS plan component through us.
Oh, look, I just want to thank you, Jayne, for a wonderful presentation, and hopefully our members will be able to see it online across Australia. We're all going to be meeting at various times over the next month or two. So I really greatly appreciate your presentation today, and I'd also like to thank Sasha and all the other South Australian family members for organising the event and getting together to hear you.
Thank you.
Thank you.